All right, and we are live. So thank you guys for joining me for our third quarter book club, which, as always, is going to be a book that was published before the year 2000. I don't exactly know how to say that in a clearer way because a part of me wants to be like classic literature, but that's not really quite the case. Um, so a fiction book that was published before the year 2000 is what I'm going with here. Um, This is our book club, which we have every 3 months. So we've actually been reading this since August. No, August, September, October. I know what months are. Um, we also have two clubs they happen every single month. We've already had them for this month. You can go check those out on our YouTube page or on our Facebook group, where we don't just have these past picks, but everything that we have done in all of the months prior. We've been doing this for about 2 years at this point, I think. So there's a lot of backlog there. And if you want to join the discussion on them, just let me know. I always love talking about media. I made these clubs specifically so I could talk about media. But if you join our Facebook group, you can find out what our next picks are going to be for our movie listening and book club. They'll all be announced on the first of the month. And then I will add them into the guides tab so that they are easier to find. I will do my best to remember to do that. I have failed to do that for several months before, so please forgive me. I am only human. And that's not the only thing that we have in our Facebook group. We also have, if you're in the LA area, sometimes we do meetups. We have weekly calls where we talk about what it's like to be a creative and problems that come by with that. We have a writers group, and a bunch of like other fun things. And if you like us and you would like to support us in everything that we do have a Patreon. Right now, everything is free to our Facebook group, but we are working on changing that and getting some perks in the Patreon. You can support us for as little as $2 a month, and it just helps Beckett and I keep this thing running. Um, I tried to keep it short today, so without further ado, let's talk about Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel García Márquez. This is a 1985 novel. It was actually published in English in 1988, but it was originally published in Spanish in Colombia. Most translations were done by the same woman, but there is a little bit of things that get changed a lot with translation. This is a really interesting novel to me in the sense of it just kind of flows. Like I wasn't exactly sure at what point in time I should put this down and go to bed. But let me get started. Had you guys read this book before? Did you like it?
No and no.
I'm shocked.
I had not read the book before. I'd started to read 100 Years of Solitude, but hadn't gotten very far. And then I picked this up, and I do enjoy the book, but I have some ideas about that nobody else would probably agree with. So
I'll bet on it.
And what about you, Tim?
This one I have not read before. There are things that I like about it. There are things that I don't. And I think I'll save all that for the larger conversation.
I mean, this is the larger conversation. Welcome. Welcome to the larger conversation. I will say before we get started that there will be spoilers for the book in this. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and read it first, and then find the YouTube again. There is a lot to talk about with this book. I think that his best known novel is probably 100 Years of Solitude. but I picked this one mainly because I had a collection of books that I own and have never read, and this was amongst them. So
Fair.
I put a bunch of books that I had that fit the criteria that I never read into the poll, and this was the one that won. And I am glad that I got pushed to read it, because I don't know if I would have pushed myself to finish it if I didn't have a purpose for it. I also have a complicated relationship with this book. I think I highlighted more passages in it than I ever have any book ever before. But I am very happy that I am no longer reading it. I'm very happy that I read it. There are things that I really, really like about this novel. There are things that like I said, I just did not enjoy my experience while I was reading it. I like thinking about it in the past more than I like reading it, which I feel like is also one of the themes of this, of, there's something to be said about like the idea of love versus the actuality of love in this book.
Yeah, I think what on paper I should have really enjoyed this book. I mean, not that it was my focus in school in university was Victorian literature. Not that this was written in the Victorian era, but it takes place in like the late 19th century / turn of the century era, and I usually like that kind of thing.
It also has a lot of similarities with Victorian literature in terms of like the way it's written.
Yeah, it does. So on paper, I should really like this book, but I did not find myself caring about any of the people in it or what was happening to them, and actively hating kind of the protagonist. So
I have no respect for Florentino.
No.
I think that, the way I saw Florentino right from the start was that what he was calling love was not love. It's obsessive stalking. I mean, the way if you want to use sort of modern terminology, he's a incel who graduates to being a pickup artist. And I think, now Márquez is, after the book was published, he said something along the lines of, be careful you don't fall into my trap. And I've been wondering what he meant by that, whether the trap was to believe that Florentino was a good guy, because I think that he was writing it's much like Lolita. The main character is not somebody you ultimately like. I mean, with Lolita, it's more obvious. Here, it's like he takes you along throughout the entire book, and only slowly at the end you start going, wait a second.
It's also weird because there's a relatively happy ending for them as far as like a romance goes, which also leads to be very confusing as far as like how toxic this is.
Yeah, well, and this man is a predator. He's like the worst kind of. He's more than a pickup artist. He is actively a predator. So.
Oh yeah. I think for me,
he ends up grooming his distant family member at the age of 14, I think is when they met.
14, yes.
Anytime, and you don't get to that until closer to the end of the book. And so I was like, well, I have to finish this now. But I felt my skin crawling whenever she was brought up, because, ugh.
Yeah. I remember I got to that passage and I was like, oh, Beckett's gonna hate this.
I mean, I would be uncomfortable if you read that passage and thought, oh man, someone's gonna love this. Like I would be more concerned.
I would be uncomfortable if anyone read that passage and wasn't wasn't having issues with it.
I would have a problem if somebody were to say of the book a love story of astonishing power. That just seems insane.
Yeah,
I
do you
was
think
reading-
Newsweek actually read this?
I don't think so.
somebody, and I was looking over the comments in either or Goodreads or the other book thing that I've got, and I was looking through reviews, and somebody said it should have been called "Sex in the Time of Cholera."
Well, the title in and of itself is very much a pun in Spanish because cholera also means passion. But I mean that's kind of the thing is it's just this weird feverous thing that's not good. Like that's the entire title of it. You can get that from the title. Um
Yeah.
love is a disease, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that there is like a fairly stark separation between Florentino's what he calls love and the relationship between Fermina Daza and Juvenal Urbino. They start out not loving each other, but they grow into it, and it becomes this very real love, which is full of complexity. Whereas Florentino's version of love is just bouncing from one woman to another and not really having that much of a complex relationship with anybody.
Do you believe in love at first sight or just true love in general?
Me personally,
Yeah, just general
I mean,
general question for everybody in this group.
certainly for me, I have experienced what I would call love at first sight, and I hate myself for it. And yes, true love. I mean, but that's a hard thing to really define in some ways.
I find that people's definition of like I think I should phrase it more as like soulmates, I think has like a different vibe. I read a lot of like romance novels and there are a lot of them where I'm like, this isn't it. This isn't it, babe.
Yeah, I don't think I do. I think love is kind of a fleeting emotion, and what lasts and holds up much better is friendship. And I not that I'm one to speak. I don't have a long-term partner, but like I found when you're in like a love type relationship, once the initial infatuation wears off, if there's no friendship there, there's nothing to stand on. So
I am in a long-term relationship and I always say that I always love Ryan, but I don't like him a lot of the time. Like it is a decision.
I don't think it's a question of whether or not love is. I think perhaps we've redefined love in our minds in such a way that it doesn't really have any relationship to. We have this idealized idea of love, and the reality is something very different. I think you can. I do believe in love, but I think a lot of people call something love that's not love, and then then you have this stuff.
Yeah, this novel made me think about love as just a thing a lot.
yeah, I found myself because the novel is very descriptive in the way that it's written, where like it's more just a catalog of events than anything. So I wasn't really thinking about the underlying themes too much until it got closer to the end and sort of like the climax and love and death and all that stuff. But like I don't know, the relationship with America, it just
it overrode everything.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I mean,
the novel for you.
And I understand that it was a different time back then. Like he does state at some point too that like women who were 22 and unmarried were already over the hill and seen as spinsters and had no hope for marriage at that point. So and I know women were getting married and maturing younger, but it's also like he actively like groomed her into a relationship with him. He didn't, and the family entrusted her to be taken care of by a family member. and this is what happened. And big spoiler alert, she ends up dying. She ends up killing herself. And I don't know if Gabriel Garcia Marquez knows what teenage love is, because I can't see like a 17-year-old girl taking her own life over an 80-year-old man, but maybe that's just me.
Well, you haven't met this 80-year-old man.
He doesn't seem like
Come on.
anything special to me.
You know,
Oh.
one of the things that really complicates this, and it's the reason that I love Marquez's writing, is that he never judges his characters. He has, if other characters have judgment, because late in the novel, after the whole America thing has gone down, he's talking about Florentino's reputation, and one of the women, I guess they all know him as a pervert, and all this, and that's the first time that that there's any suggestion that the world outside of Florentino looks at him as not a good guy. Prior to that, the only suggestion we have that he's not a good guy is what we see of his behavior. So and this is a thing that is very consistent in Marquez's writing. He never judges his characters. They do what they do. They're true to who their characters are, and Marquez just lets them exist like that. And if there's any judgment to be had, it's had by other characters within the novel.
I am very impressed with his writing, even though this is in translation. A part of me wants to learn Spanish and then read 100 Years of Solitude, because his writing really, really got to me. Like I said, I have a complicated relationship with this novel because it is absolutely gorgeous. His descriptions, it is like, I think the biggest romance in this book is just the relationship that Garcia Marquez has with words. But it's so flowery, and also, like Beckett said, kind of just a series of events. Like this is a very complicated novel in my brain, and I'm trying to figure out how to market it out. But I also want to start with how it started with Jeremiah de Saint-Amour, who also died by suicide.
Right, I forgot about him.
And also has probably one of the healthier relationships in the book. Also, I spent a lot of this book just going back to, what does a famous photographer of children do? That's beside the point. I just, because I was trying to think about like talking points for this, and I think that's an interesting place that they started this book with this character who is a friend of Dr. Urbino, a guy who dies pretty soon after this anyways, and isn't like, is a side character pretty much. So we're starting with the friend of a side character, but it's just a really interesting juxtaposition of him going and talking to this lady and about love is essentially how this novel starts. And how does that like set the tone for the rest of it?
You know, it's very interesting because reading the first 50 pages of this novel, there's no way to see where it is eventually going. It just seems so, and it just keeps going and going. There's a moment I was not going to finish reading it in time because I'm doing a lot of commuting. And so I broke down, and for the last 110 pages, I did the audiobook. I was I don't know. It just, there's a moment where he I didn't know where I was in the novel because I'm just listening to it, and they're going over, Florentino was looking back on his life with all these women, and I'm thinking, oh God, it's finally winding up. You know, he's summarizing all these women that I've been involved with, and here's what I've learned from that. And no, it still goes on for another hour and a half in audiobook time. and I think I talked about this in our meeting, how, I normally don't like to read prose that is all expository. I never feel like I'm in the world of the book. But Marquez just his prose is always gorgeous. It's just the way he uses language. No matter how fucking boring the book is, I had no interest in these characters. There was no story to really care about. At some points, I thought he was just trying to show us what life in this fictional city and the surrounding lands were like at the time. That the characters were kind of beside the point, but that doesn't seem to be it. So so the only thing that I had to grab onto was how gorgeous his language is and how he can make expository writing so readable for those of us who prefer more dialogue in our novels.
Do you think that has something to do with the fact that this is a novel essentially about the different forms of love and like the deeper emotional level of it? Like, does it make you think about what the characters are doing more instead of listening to how they relate to each other? You spend a lot more time thinking about how they relate, I guess, to themselves or to the idea of others.
I can't answer that question because I think at some point I just didn't give a shit anymore. And what Beckett said, or was it one of you, either you or Beckett said that that you wouldn't have read it if it wasn't for the book club meeting. I wouldn't have finished it if it wasn't for this discussion. The only reason that I just kept plodding on is like, okay, well, we're going to discuss this thing, so I got to finish it. Otherwise, I would have said, you know what? Let me just pull down Cien Años de Soledad and reread that again, because it's. I sometimes I thought, okay, he's Florentino and Fermina Daza. They're all metaphors or they're archetypes or something in the way that the Buendia family is in 100 Years of Solitude, but they're not. They're these flawed people with character traits that I couldn't really find anything to grab onto. So I all I had was the language. Other than that, I was fucking bored to tears. It just went on and on and on and on. The ending was, you know what? I should have just read the last third of the book, even though that's got the pedophilia stuff in it. It felt like the last act when Fermina Daza and Florentino Ariza get on the boat. All of a sudden, the novel seems to bloom into something that's really interesting and that wants to say something about how we age and what relationships are as what we age. So, I could have cut the first 2/3 of this book off and you would have had a great, tale to tell.
I do find their reuniting at the end very engaging, and I did very much enjoy the last chapter where they're on the ferry together. But it's like I had a hard time enjoying any of that because anytime I would start to get into it and find some sympathy for these characters, he would mention America again. And I'd be like, oh yeah, this fucking guy.
I don't know. I sort of, okay. Did anybody notice the duplicated sentences?
Yes.
In the original Riverboat thing, there's a thing about, and he duplicates these 2 sentences in both riverboat scenes. And then there is also a duplication of each boat is named after some prior thing. And then the riverboat captain is angry at people shooting animals off the boat. There are these repetitions going on. And I think Marquez is hopping up and down and shouting, look at these 2 scenes. There's something deeply connected here. And that led me to think about something that I have not seen anybody else discuss, and I think it's a stupid idea, but I can't get away from it. Okay, first of all, the book's name is Love in the Time of Cholera. Nobody in the story ever gets cholera. except unless you think at the moment that, okay, where Florentino is sexually assaulted on the riverboat, and then he starts to, he has all of that, and then he starts thinking, oh, Fermina is off on her, or is getting married at this moment, and he starts developing the symptoms of cholera. And so the boat captain puts him in quarantine. And then a sentence later, he's fine. The whole thing, this is Chekhov's gun. I mean, the whole riverboat that he goes on, he's going to get a job as a telegraph operator in some distant town. And then when he reaches the port of destination, he goes, screw it, I'm going back. What's the point of that? And then supposedly he may have cholera, but then he's cured a sentence later. Again, why is this happening? And it's not because Márquez is a terrible storyteller, because he's obviously doing something here. And my stupid idea is that at the point that he supposedly gets cholera, he does get cholera. And the rest of the book is his delirium as he, as he is sort of fantasizing, and there are so many little things that maybe I'm just intentionally reinterpreting things, but there are little bits of information that seem as if a person is sort of in this weird hallucinatory state and picking up little details around him, like the cabin in his office when he's like president of the riverboat company. He has a little office behind there, and it looks like a riverboat captain or a riverboat cabin. I mean, there are so many little details that I look at. It's like, well, that could be just him picking up an idea as he's sort of dying. And then the last line of the book, it's like, the captain is saying, how long can we keep going back and forth with the plague flag up? And he says, forever. And there's no forever in life, but there is in death.
I love this interpretation, and I am accepting it as canon because it also makes a lot more sense with like magical realism as well.
I watched the discussion. Somebody was saying there's no magical realism unless it's like the 622 affairs he had. And so, yeah, I'm sorry, back at you.
Yeah, no, I like that theory about it a lot. Because that would very much explain how this man is such a womanizer when he seems like just a very ordinary guy.
And America, she is 14, I think, when they meet. And he meets Fermina Daza when she's 13, basically the same age. And America is described as being very much like Fermina Daza. And it could just be this guy sort of blearily sort of connecting things in his memory of this very young girl who he knew so many, not that many years ago, because he would have died when he was 25, only shortly after he was rejected by Fermina. So I don't know. If you read the book from that perspective, it gets very different than if you read it as if it is just a normal narrative.
Lars, I fucking hate you now, because now you got me thinking I need to read this fucking book again.
I've read it twice.
See what this is, because it's such a genius interpretation, and I can't find any holes in that interpretation.
Well, I have some big holes. Sorry, I didn't mean it.
No, I am fascinated by this, and
Okay.
I want to continue down this road. Please continue.
The major problem with this theory is that at one point he is talking about airplanes, which really were not a popular thing until 1908. The Wright brothers' flight was 1903, but it didn't really become something in popular understanding until 1908. And he also attends a showing of the film Cabiria, which was released in 1914. So you can say that, well, he knows about things that he couldn't possibly know of because he died before that. So that's like a couple of the major holes in that theory. But I still have a problem. I still can't see. I don't know.
No, I love it. It honestly is the only thing that is kind of given Florentino any redeeming qualities is your interpretation of it right now. Um,
I still think he's a real awful human being.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me because I did a lot of research, and this is fortunately one of the books that have been done by a lot of book clubs. So book
Mhm.
clubs actually have like lists of questions, and I compiled all of those questions together. And a weird number of them are just like, is like Florentino like redeemable at the end? And I'm like, why is that even a question? I don't. Um, like coming back around to them and like the end and like is he sympathetic or is just the whole thing like tragic or just a manipulation tactic, like is it just gaslighting? um but it seems so weird to me to even take on the thing that he could be sympathetic in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I find it strange that, if you do read it as just a straightforward narrative, um, he really doesn't suffer any consequences for the way that he's lived his life. He gets everything he wants in the end.
And I thought that maybe it was because I'm a woman that I felt this way. And so like I wasn't sure if it was just me getting the ick.
No.
Well, and that's perfectly valid, though, even if that's the case.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
I got the ick, and I'm not a woman. I totally got the ick.
but
that
anyway,
that was an interesting. I wanted to talk about that because that was an interesting moment for me because I wanted to. I had to think really hard about how Marquez writes, and that's when I remembered the fact that he never judges his characters, and I thought, okay, why is this here? He could have. I couldn't find, and Lars's idea accounts for this. Why did he decide? Okay, if they don't dislike Florentino yet, I'm going to give them something to really fucking hate him. It didn't need to be there, and I know that Marquez does not put stuff in a book if
I,
it's never unintentional. So why is it there? I just couldn't. I still battle with it. I wanna blame Marquez, but I know it's not. I know there's a code that I'm not breaking, that perhaps that we're not breaking, as to why he decided to just go down the hole completely and just make Florentino a completely horrible human being instead of just a sort of horrible human being.
well, Lars actually already brought this up. Like, America is described as Fermina and is the
Right.
same age as they were. This is him grasping on to anything that's based on this idea that he has of Fermina and not her aging, which also makes it interesting in the end that he was willing to accept her at the age that she is now, because it kind of gives me the impression that he had this just idea and she could never grow from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
But it is interesting to me that he did like renew his pursuit of her and like met her where she is almost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very much. He's very patient in his pursuit. I mean, as patient as one could be when, exclaiming your love for someone right after their husband dies. But
that was a bit of a tacky move there.
he's a bit of a tacky guy.
He's an obsessive.
Yeah.
And the other thing that made me dislike him, and I don't know whether you guys caught this either. There's the incident where I forget what he writes on the belly of the woman that he's sleeping with, who's married, and her husband
This pussy
murders
is mine.
her. And his response to her being murdered is so all about him that I think that's when I was like, oh my God, this guy really is a piece of shit. It was just such a I as soon as he did it, I knew as soon as as soon as he painted on her belly, I thought, oh, this is not going to end well. But then his response to that, to not show any feeling of culpability for the murder of this woman, that just really just, I was like, I'm just done with this motherfucker at this point.
A part of me wonders, so I really like sci-fi because sci-fi, you can get so far away from humanity that you can take a look back on humanity from a philosophical standpoint. And a part of me wonders if that's what Florentino is he's so far away from being like a good person that now we can look back on like what this emotion actually is without getting our feelings about this person involved, because you can't like him. So now we can just like separate this obsession and this feeling of love from him as a person, because we're not rooting for him.
It occurs to me
And
that
also just aging and how we change over time.
it occurs to me that and this is not something we've never seen in a character or real life human being before, is that he's not in love with Fermina Daza. His love for Fermina Daza is all about him. It has little to nothing to do with her. So, to call it, I mean, it is just pure obsession. I think you can be obsessed and be in love with somebody, but there's nothing that we know about Florentino to suggest that his love for her has anything to do with her in any way. It's all about him.
I have two questions. The first one, because it leans on this one, is do you think the ending is ironic then? Like, do you think that this is all just like a false ending for him? He declares his undying love, like swears to be faithful to her forever and be with her
Well,
forever. Like, is it an ironic ending?
well, he lies all the time,
Yeah.
and it's like he says to Firmino, "Oh, I'm a virgin. I've saved myself for you." It's like, really? You can get a
Yeah.
lie that big out of your neck? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Ironic? I don't know.
I guess, is it a happy ending for them?
To me, it wasn't a happy ending. I thought it was a disturbing and very troubling ending, because there is a woman who is sort of coming to accept him, and he has created this whole facade of who he is, and she is starting to love that facade. Oh, that's an interesting point, because my attitude towards Florentino, from the whole idea of crushes and the whole idea of obsessive love, is you project an image of what you want on somebody else, and then you fall in love with that image. You don't ever actually fall in love with the person. And what is happening at the end is Fermina Daza is beginning to fall in love with a facade on Florentino. And he's basically gaslighting and tricking her, and they're going to be trapped in this thing. I think the actual line in the Spanish is "as long as there is life," and in English it's translated to "forever."
Mhm.
But there may be some interesting thoughts on that.
Yeah, I actually got the impression that if they do ever make it back to shore, this is not continuing. Like, it's only for as long as they're on the boat. So once they get off the boat, it's like death, because they will never speak to each other again. That was my interpretation.
Because of the way Marquez likes to write almost mythical feeling scenarios, that I honestly think they do go on forever. They never come back to shore. And that's probably it's probably the same as death. They're together forever, whether or not maybe they're dead already. I think I think in Marquez's universe they would never come back to shore, just based on how he tells his stories.
Which I think is definitely something that you can glean from just the fact, and I find it kind of funny every time Marquez describes just the oodles of dead people everywhere that they just pass by, and like the floating bodies in the river, and nobody cares. Like they're still swimming in the water. So yeah.
I love the one time when Fermina Daza, I think she's with her husband at the time, when they're on the boat, on the river boat, and they encounter these dead bodies, and people were saying it was cholera, but in fact, there's a single tap shot to the back of the head on all of them. And what I love, this is another thing that I love about his writing, is that he doesn't dwell on that at all. He delivers that fact and then lets you just luxuriate in that while he moves on and tells the rest of a story. It's like he drops this bomb, and he's so much of the scenes that he paints in his work. I was thinking a lot about Fellini. I was thinking of Amarcord in particular, just because of the way the story is told and how there's so much stuff going on in it that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the main characters, but it feels Fellini-esque when he does something like that. It talks about, they all, strangely enough, they all had shots in the back of their head. So Fermina Daza continued down the river with her husband and went to a happy place called whatever,
I read a little bit on Gabriel Garcia Márquez before getting on this call, and one of the weirder things is that he based the characters on his parents. Vaguely. I guess his dad really pursued his mom, and his grandparents did not agree with it, and so there was like a huge fight for them to get together. And then they got together, had him, and left him with his grandparents, which seems like a weird move, but a lot of his storytelling was inherited from his grandparents. His grandfather, who was a colonel, and was he told stories like of his time in war times. He was very, very outspoken about the banana massacres, and like told a lot of these like war stories and didn't really mince the truth a lot. And his grandmother, he said, told stories as if everything in them was an irrefutable truth, even if it was the most mystical of stories. And so like I heard those two things and I was like, I can see where his writing comes from.
Yeah. And those things that you just said, I mean, that's the story of 100 Years of Solitude. That's exactly how that book reads. And I think Solitude is a better book, but that's my personal opinion, just because I don't think I understand this book enough to rank it in relation to anything.
I think when it comes to this book, I am still going to be thinking about pieces of it 10 years from now, and maybe then I will come to a different conclusion than I have right now. I have that as a distinct feeling about this book.
I really appreciate
the more I separate myself from it, I think my opinion will change.
I very much appreciate his skill at crafting a scene. He really knows how to paint a picture in words.
What do we think about the fact that this isn't broken up into chapters? I have never read Solitude at all, but does it have sections in it?
It's very much, it's very much structured, narratively speaking, like this. It's long, but they're much more readable. I think they're much more readable because, I mean, I just got sucked in by those characters and the very mythic structure of the story itself. It was, it's kind of one of those books that, you think it's going to be too long and you might be bored, but it's just so rich that you want it to keep going on forever. Actually, that's how that is.
Because I said at the start of this call, one of my struggles with this book was figuring out when I could put it down because it felt like every sentence led into the next one. And it felt like I was being taken on a journey and like there was a story being told, but I was being distracted by everything else along the way. And I was wondering if that played into this story or if that's just what he writes like. And it sounds like that's just what he writes like.
Yeah, that's how he writes.
Very weirdly beatnik of him.
It almost feels like stream of consciousness. I mean, I know he wrote stuff and then he would edit it, but it really feels like he just sat down and just started typing and 6 months later he wrote the last page and it was done. That's just how his material feels.
That's what I mean by it feels very beatnik of him, is that was the
Yeah.
actual process that a lot of those writers went through,
Yeah.
is they would like write daily what they saw for the act of writing a novel all in one.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
stream of consciousness is a really good way to describe it, because I don't know about you guys and if this was your experience, but for me, it was very much like I couldn't figure out where things were connecting until like much later on. So he'd like bring some event or person up and I'd be like, who is this? Wait, have we mentioned this person before? What do they have to do with the story? And then like later it would be kind of justified in the narrative.
When I pulled up the Wikipedia page, it's like, here's the list of characters. And I'm not going to lie, I don't remember most of these characters.
There were a lot of characters.
I'd be reading and this character would come up, and the way that the character comes up in the scene, you're like, okay, this character obviously was in the book somewhere before, but I don't remember. So I'm backing through the pages trying to find. That's one thing that's great about Kindle. You can just type in the name and Kindle will tell you where that name appears in the book. But it was so often that, okay, I know that name. Where was she? What was she in the story before?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the stream of consciousness, it really does feel like that, but I think it's a very controlled writing. I think because there are a lot of things that just seem to sort of connect without you realizing it. Maybe this is a bit of a segue, but I guess for me, one of the things I really just loved was the characterization of Florentino. He's not a good person at all, but he's a very accurate description of a certain kind of person. And, and to my horror, I recognize some of myself, and at least my young self, in some of the young Florentino. So it's like, yeah. Didn't really like that, but
maybe this will make you feel better. I saw some of myself in the younger Florentino as well.
Yeah. Hopefully not in the older Florentino.
No. The younger version of him is not quite as detestable.
Yeah, but he's more of a confused young man, I would say. He doesn't understand how to interact with people, really. And, I mean, I would identify on the autism spectrum, and I would say that, yeah, those characteristics, that difficulty in understanding what people mean when they say things or how to interact, is very characteristic. And I think that's where I'm seeing the similarity, is I think Florentino might be that kind of socially awkward person.
Yeah.
He feels a bit like Candide. He feels a bit like Candide in the early chapters. I don't know if you guys have read Candide.
I'm not familiar with the title, but never read it.
Just a very naive young person who has this idealistic view of the world early on, and the novel is all about what it's like for somebody who is that naive and just has that sunny side of life view of the world as he goes through it. And yeah, if you ever get a chance to read Candide, it's one of those foundational novels that'll help you get through stuff like this. But he felt very much like Candide to me in the early chapters.
I just ran across a quote from Thomas Pynchon that I really liked here. This novel is also revolutionary and daring to suggest that vows of love made under the presumption of immortality, youthful idiocy, as to some, may yet be honored much later in life when we ought to know better in the face of the undeniable. And I was like, I like that as a quote. We are coming up on an hour. Was there anything that people wanted to talk about specifically?
Actually, yeah, I can't remember. It was the time when he was assaulted on the riverboat. Was that his first sexual experience?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that then his life after that, it makes more sense because like if that's your first introduction, like he was raped basically, like, and that's how he was introduced to sex. So I don't know. It kind of follows that he would have a cavalier opinion, like approach to it after that.
Yeah, even that though, the description of it is a little odd. He's walking down the corridor, door opens, naked woman grabs him, pulls him inside, and just
has her way with him.
herself on
Yeah.
him. Yeah,
I find
and
that
it's
to
like,
be another.
wow, that's a bit of a male fantasy thing going on there.
That's a lot. Yeah, no, I wanted to bring that up because I find that that's like all of the women in this book are basically like just ready to go at any time with seemingly anybody. So it's like this is a very, very chauvinistic view of women and their sexuality where it's like they can, you know, because it seems to be that every woman that he meets is just ready to have sex with him at any, you know, at the drop of a hat.
There's also the story. There's also the story in the last third of the novel where the woman is raped and she's obsessively in love with her rapist, which
that's Leona Cassiani.
Yeah, I can't remember.
No, it was the girl at the opera house.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of interesting versions of love as an obsession in this book, and it shows it in a variety of different ways. Also, the differentiation between love and sex is also very, very prominent in this, especially in the way that Florentino says that he is, you know, forever chaste for Mina while also having many sexual exploits. I think for him, being chaste just meant that he didn't love any of them.
Or
I think there's a huge separation there.
That he didn't commit to any of them, because later he does kind of admit that he had some love for some of them in certain ways.
Right.
What made me really uncomfortable with the rape reference was that it wasn't referred to as rape. It says he grabbed her and he made love to her. And that's what really just, I was just really uncomfortable with that. And, you know, I know that it's a snapshot of how men thought back in the day. And if we think of Florentino is not the narrator, but he seems to be a part of the narrator's voice. And so I would attribute that to Florentino, how Florentino would view that incident with. He would think of it as that, yes, he grabbed her and made love to her against her will.
I guess that went over my head. I interpreted that as like a one-night stand, but
I also interpreted it as a one-night stand.
Oh, I did not. I interpreted it as rape. Maybe I need to. Oh God, I'm gonna have to read the fucking book again.
I don't know. I mean, you could be right. Maybe it just went over my head. But like, yeah, I find that this book is basically just a very elongated male fantasy. Like every woman that you meet is going to have sex with you and also fall in love with you. So
again, that's sort of my argument for the delirium fantasy that becomes the entire book. Is it does really read as if it's somebody's fantasy of how their life might play out, rather than what would really happen.
Well, and especially because he doesn't really try very hard, and yet he gets a lot of good things out of life. Like he gets a lot of women, he gets a really good job, like, and he's kind of just
I mean, how reliable is our narrator, though? We've established that Florentino is at least a part of the narrator, and we've also established that he's a liar. So
Yeah.
we don't
Fair.
exactly know what happened at these times. He
I'll-
could be doing way worse things. He could have never had any of these affairs and is just trying to pump himself up.
Mhm.
That's
So there's a lot of illusion, I guess, mental illusion, and just
Although seemingly
presenting yourself and as ideas.
seemingly he does get promoted to president of the riverboat company, though. So
Yeah,
But that
true.
was something I found odd because his work before his riverboat journey was as a telegraph operator. Suddenly he turns around and goes this whole different trajectory. And why is it the riverboat? Well, he's on a riverboat, so maybe that just feeds into what he's thinking. Or again,
I
keep
can't fault
pounding
him
for
for
my-
that. I've made career
In-
changes like that in the past.
Sure.
So
you mean in his delirium? I think he ends up working in the riverboat company because his uncle owns it.
Yes. Yeah, I mean
And-
that is ostensibly why, but
When
it's-
Uncle, it seems really sudden when Uncle Leo decide the way Márquez describes it. It's like all of a sudden Uncle Leo gave it some thought and he said, "You know what? I'm going to leave this to Florentino." It happened so quick that I think it speaks to your whole, the whole last half of the book being his delirium, because it doesn't. It seems so unprepared. You get the feeling that there's no way this guy is ever going to move up in this company, just based on his behavior and his lack of talent at anything.
Well,
You
at
think about
the end,
the time period, though. Apparently, Uncle Leo's 4 sons all died circumstantially, so he had no male heir, and his daughter didn't want to have anything to do with it, so he had to leave it to someone.
yeah, but Florentino's way of managing the riverboat company is terrible because, like, right at the end, he's saying, "Well, they're destroying all this land around the river." And he says, "Well, by the time all the forests are gone, riverboats will run on oil. So what's the big deal?" It's a terrible way to run a company.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
not that people don't. But
the narrative doesn't tell us whether or not it succeeded after that.
yeah, true. But what I'm saying is, like, this is not a guy I would promote to chairman of the board or whatever.
Yeah.
he's got real white guy energy.
He's got very accidentally fell into success.
Yeah, failing upward a little.
Failing upwards, yes, that's the phrase.
I just think that Lars's theory, and maybe I just like it because it makes me much more comfortable with the book than I would be otherwise. But it makes the book make more sense, I think.
Yeah, for me, the thing that made me think that was it felt as if those two repeated sentences were kind of like a timestamp. That first occurrence is actually the same point in time as the second occurrence. And that this is just all this maybe day that he's dying just collapsed. I don't know. That was my thinking. I still think it's got a problematic idea, but still.
I think it's got legs.
Yeah, it
I
does.
agree.
It makes him a lot more manageable
Yeah, I
in my
don't-
head.
My concern, I don't want to whitewash the horror of the stuff he does. And so I don't know.
Was there anything else that anybody had, any pressing matters that we needed to discuss before we call the meeting for the night?
I would just say, please, please, please read 100 Years of Solitude, either in translation or, in Spanish if you can. It's just such a masterpiece of the book, and it has none of the problems that this book has. It's just such an incredible novel. And I'm afraid that people will maybe watch, because we have a big viewership, that they'll see this and they'll like, oh, this is not the novel for me, and just think that maybe Márquez, because I read some of the reviews in Storygraph and in Goodreads, and people are saying, yeah, the Márquez, no, I'm not going to do him anymore. And Yeah,
No,
'cause
his writing is phenomenal. Even I said at the start of this, it makes me want to read a different book from him.
And this book
Because
won the Nobel
it's
Prize.
it's Florentino I don't like. No,
100 Years
he
of Solitude won the Nobel
Oh,
Prize.
that makes
Was
more
the
sense.
book, or was he just given a Nobel Prize based on his writing?
I
I
thought
thought
that it
it
was
wasn't
just
any
him.
specific.
I thought
Yeah.
it wasn't a book specific. I thought it was
Oh,
the
and
author.
that could be.
right.
That could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me because I think everybody ties it to 100 Years of Solitude because, that's his masterwork. But yeah, you're probably right. It was for his career.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
All
He is
right.
an exquisite writer. So
Yes, definitely check out his work and just master writer.
Hmm.
All right. So thank you guys for joining me tonight, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
bye.
Bye.